diplomatic studies. I would like to greet all the students, all the UC coordinators who helped us organize this, and our partners from MESA 10, on behalf of TES Director Jelena Milic and the entire team. This is actually the 7th year since we are implementing the project together with the MESA 10 organization from Slovakia. The project is called Promoting Democratic Values Among Youth, and actually it is still supported by the National Endowment for Democracy. This workshop today is just one part of the project activities that we are implementing. First part of the activities was actually the debate which we had in November last year in Belgrade. Unfortunately, due to the current COVID-19 situation, we were unable to do the workshop at the university, so that is why we are connected all via Zoom. I would like to greet Ms. Suzana Grubješić. She is going to be today's lecturer at the workshop Western Balkans and the EU membership. Ms. Suzana Grubješić, for you who doesn't know her, and I don't think there is a lot of people who doesn't know Suzana Grubješić. She is currently engaged as the consultant in the Center for Foreign Policy. She was Secretary General of the European Movement in Serbia. Prior to that, she was Special Advisor in European integration to the Minister of Trade, Tourism and Telecommunications. Before that, she was Senior Fellow at the Center for International Relations and Sustainable Development. And she was previously Deputy Prime Minister for European integration in the government of Serbia. She was a member of Serbian Parliament for 8 consecutive years, holding positions of Head of Parliamentary Group, Head of Committee for European Integrations, and Member of Committee for Foreign Affairs and Budget Finance. So I think she is going to have a lot to say on this topic today. We are going to start with her lecture. She also has a PowerPoint presentation. And after she finishes with her lecture, I encourage all the students to ask questions. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Ms. Suzana Grubješić.
Thank you, Anja, very much for this nice, sorry, I can hear my voice over there. Can we close the door? It's a distraction from another room, so just a second. I can hear myself over somewhere. Okay, it's better now. So I'm grateful for this nice introduction, and I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation to make things easier both for you and for myself. But please feel free to interrupt and comment whenever you think that there is something that I missed or there is something that you have comment on. So it's not a typical lecture. I prefer to see it as a conversation. It's important topic for all of us here in the region, but I think it's also important topic for the EU itself, because it tackles some mutual interests and some mutual problems that we have in our relations. So let me start with the overview of Serbia, and then I will go further to the region. So I titled it The Case of Serbia. So okay, let's talk a little bit with the case of Serbia. And I already see that I made a mistake in the first sentence. In November 2000, the Zagreb summit happened, and it was the launch of stabilization and association process for the Balkans, because let us remember that Western Balkans was more or less introduced after Croatia became a member state in 2013. Before that, we were Balkans. That was the initial date to start the process. Then in 2009, in December, we submitted our application for EU membership, and in the same month we received visa-free travel for Schengen area. And it took us 3 years to receive the candidate status in March 2012. in September next year, 2013, the Stabilization and Association Agreement entered into force, and we started our formal accession talks in January 2014. So it took us 14 years to actually start the accession process. Where are we now? 6 years after the start of negotiations, we've managed to open 18 chapters out of 35 and to provisionally close 2. This is what I call, not only me, but many analysts, the pace of Turkey. It is the Turkey that opened 1 or 2 chapters per one international governmental conference. That's the case of Serbia from the start of our accession talks. But in the meantime, both Serbia and European Union have changed. Serbia entered the process as part of Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, then part of the State Union, Serbia and Montenegro, and as of 2006, as an independent country. And on the other hand, European Union had 3 waves of enlargement, or 2, 2004, 7, and 13. And it received, or 13 countries joined the European Union. Only 1 from the region, from the Western Balkans or Balkans, joined the European Union, and that was Croatia. On February 6, 2018, the European Commission published credible enlargement perspectives for an enhanced EU engagement with Western Balkans, and it was the first time that a potential year of admission of Serbia and Montenegro was published, 2025, and Serbia and Montenegro were labeled as front runners in the process. But let us not forget that the enlargement strategy has never been adopted by member states. Then we had the summit in Sofia in May 2018, 15 years after Thessaloniki, and there were rumors that Sofia could potentially be Thessaloniki too, but it didn't happen. I was there, and it was not about enlargement, it was about connectivity, which was taken from the Berlin process. And as a comparison, within 15 years, there were 5 Eastern Partnership summits with the European Union, and not a single one with the Western Balkans. What about the other countries? Montenegro started negotiations in 2012. They managed to open all chapters except 1, competition, and provisionally closed 3 chapters. North Macedonia is a candidate country as of 2005, Albania as of 2014, Bosnia and Herzegovina has a potential candidate status, as well as Kosovo. In the meantime, Kosovo didn't receive visa liberalization up to now. So EU members failed on 3 previous occasions to agree on inviting North Macedonia and Albania to begin membership talks. But finally, recently on March 24th, and in the midst of pandemic, they gave green light to start accession negotiations to both countries, but the date has not been set yet. So hopefully by the end of this year, at least one of them will formally start accession talks. And prior to that, on February the 5th, the European Commission came with a proposal of a more credible, dynamic and political accession process, that is the new enlargement methodology, or as some call it, the revised enlargement methodology. Before the proposal was put by the European Commission, there was a French proposal and proposal of 9 member states. The French proposal took into consideration the slow pace of the process and started to put some more elements into the process itself. And also European Commission took many elements from the French proposal and incorporated into the new methodology. What is new in the new methodology? It's let's say a merit-based approach, more for more and less for less. More reforms in candidate countries bring tangible benefits, but if there is a significant democratic backsliding, negotiations could be put on hold, cancelled, and even chapters that were closed could be reopened. This proposal also put emphasis on fundamentals first, meaning democracy, the rule of law, economic development, and competitiveness. It aims to make the enlargement process more political and not only technical. So not only ticking the boxes and leaving the job to administrations, but political side of the process is also emphasized in the new methodology, meaning that member states will become more involved in the process, and that's part of introducing a shared responsibility of European Commission, candidate countries, and member states. Chapters are grouped into 6 clusters. Closing of clusters gives access to funds and inclusion of a country into European policies relevant for its implementation. So unlike let's say the old methodology, when chapters were opened one by one and closed one by one, now we have a clustering of chapters, grouping them logically so that potentially process can be faster. It aims to become predictable and fair and not open-ended, which is also important. One of the major complaints from the region has been from the beginning that the entrance into the EU, the membership was seen as a moving target. So without any doubt, this new methodology can and offers this possibility that process becomes predictable and not open-ended. North Macedonia and Albania will start negotiations under the new methodology. For Serbia and Montenegro, we were given an option to remain or to resume under the previous rules or to adapt the new methodology as well. Last week, Montenegro agreed to continue accession process with the new methodology, whereby Serbia waits for further clarifications, because we have these 18 chapters are open in all clusters. So some technical clarifications are needed, but I always say when I'm asked, what do we have to lose? I mean, it goes slowly, so I think it would be beneficial for Serbia to accept this new methodology as well. Also, in the midst of pandemic, we had the so-called historical Zagreb summit. I mean, it was supposed to be historical, like 20 years following the first summit, but the pandemic situation changed everything. So that was a virtual meeting held during the Croatian presidency of the Council, and it reconfirmed EU perspective of the region. That is for sure, but in comparison to the Sofia summit 2 years ago, it didn't offer much more than Sofia summit in terms of commitments, in terms of wording. So it's about European perspective. It's not about enlargement. It's not about commitment of member states that the Western Balkans will certainly become part of the European Union. What is also important that European Union has allocated 3.3 billion euro financial assistance to the Western Balkans to support health sector, social and economic recovery. That it also announced, but it was previously announced, but okay, let's say confirmed that a strong financial package will come in the fall, economic and investment plan for the Western Balkans. Because we are all aware of the economic situation, both in the European Union, in the United States, and in the whole world, and we can for sure expect a recession here as well. Yeah, because according to the IMF, to the EBRD, and other relevant international financial institutions, economic recession here in the Balkans will be between 3% as predicted for Serbia and 9% predicted for Montenegro. So we need to think about economic recovery as well. The whole European Union is getting ready to adopt a recovery plan as we read, and the Western Balkans needs really a recovery plan. Even without recession, we would need a recovery plan, and with the recession, that need is even more urgent. And I put it for the last slide, but not for the end of our conversation. What are the biggest challenges, both for EU and the Western Balkans? For me, the number one is that enlargement should not become containment. But to avoid that, we need political will on both sides. Political will of candidate countries to undergo necessary reforms to fulfill criteria, and to stay committed that the European integration is a strategic choice. But we also need political will from the member states, not to postpone it endlessly, not to make accession process never ending. And only if we have political will from both sides, this process can be successful. There are external actors, of course, that's no secret, but this stop and go engagement of the European Union opened the doors to others, to China, to Russia, to Turkey, some Arab states. It's no secret. There are numerous policy papers now, articles about China's influence in the Western Balkans, about mask diplomacy, about corona diplomacy, call it whatever you want, but China is here to stay. It's a reality, and we have to deal with it. When I say we, I mean we in the Western Balkans and the European Union as well. There is no vacuum in international relations. If someone is not active, there is always someone else to jump in, especially here in the region. What matters really is the regional cooperation. And having said that, I have in mind the Berlin process, which should continue, but in what form and with what substance, that is the issue. This year, it was agreed in Poznan that Bulgaria and North Macedonia will share the presidency of the next summit, but we don't know any details yet and when it will happen and what it will contain, given that connectivity agenda was back into enlargement where it belongs, actually. There are over 70 regional initiatives here in the region, and maybe we could dedicate some time in the future to assess the effects of all these regional initiatives, what real effect they have to the region, to the citizens of the region. Because there are always elephants in the room. And an uphill battle to resolve all bilateral issues in a foreseeable future. The biggest of them is, of course, the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina and the resolution of the Kosovo issue. When I spoke about our slow and bumpy road to the European Union, one of the reasons is this unresolved issue. The other one, of course, is the rule of law and the state of democracy and everything else which goes with it. But without resolving bilateral issues, the process will be slow as it is now, without any doubt. Another challenge is, as I mentioned before, post-pandemic recovery. That is how to prevent exodus from the Western Balkans, because statistics says that every 2 minutes someone leaves the Western Balkans heading to the European Union. So it is both for us the loss of workforce and brain drain, and it was very present and obvious before the pandemic. Now I'm sure it will resume, it will not stop. And the last challenge is much stronger communication strategy. Communication goes both ways, communication from the European Union and communication about the European Union in candidate countries. For me personally, EU perspective is an unconvincing notion. So stronger wording and better explanation and better expression of interests of both parties is what we need here in the region, in Serbia in particular, because the support for EU integration is in decline for years. It's around 50%, maybe less. So we need to rethink the communication and to take it into account very seriously. Okay, so this was it, and now let's talk. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Suzana. I would now leave the room for the first questions. So if anyone
comments, not necessarily questions, comments.
Comments, questions.
Yes, whatever.
To know more about the topic or whatever, I would just ask you to turn on your mic if you have a question, and then when you finish with the question or comment, just turn back off the mic. Okay. Or maybe you can just type the question or comment in the chat and I can read it.
Mm-hmm.
That is easier. Okay, let's start with Ms. Jelena Milić.
Just to break the ice, Suzana, thank you. I really enjoyed this presentation. How many regional initiatives?
Over 70.
Oh my God.
70.
You were talking about new revised enlargement strategy. If I understood properly, and I don't know many better experts than you, there is also a nuance with regards to the role of the member states in the decision-making process. And I've been following also what's going on between Germany and France and NATO with regard, for example, nuclear sharing. And I think that Ambassador Ischinger is pushing for these qualified majority voting in the areas of foreign and security policy. So what do you think would these kind of things, how would they affect the possibility for the consensus on the enlargement?
Yes, the majority voting, that was a topic that many of us advocated for majority voting in the enlargement process, because it takes a consensus, unanimous voting to open and to close every single chapter. So sometimes it's really hard work to persuade all member states when and if to open a chapter and to close a chapter, but I don't think that majority voting will be introduced, not in the new enlargement strategy. And generally, it's a topic of discussion between member states, but not soon. Maybe it will be part of the whole package of the new design of the European Union in the future, with all the announced changes, or let's say topics for debate, but not for us, not soon. Thank you. Welcome.
Okay, do we have any questions? Okay, just unmute your mic.
Hello, my name is Katerina Yakovenko. I'm a postdoc at Comenius University Department of Political Science. Thank you very much for the presentation. It's a very current and interesting topic. My comment and question is related to the Republic of North Macedonia. I know that the country had to revise its constitution to carry out that change of name. And if you look at the parliament voting, there were, I think, 80 deputies who voted for it and 40 were against it. And then the referendum was held, but the turnout was extremely low, though the referendum showed 90% of support for the change of name. And here the question is, when it comes to the accession process of the Western Balkans, how much of it is actually technical and political, and how much is like more politically sensitive relating to the questions of nationhood and the question of nationalism as it is? Serbia also has a very multifaceted relationship with NATO and the European Union. So in the light of Brexit and what was going on in Europe, where do you think the Western Balkans are in terms of this perspective? Thank you.
You're welcome. As for North Macedonia, let me say first that it has managed to resolve one huge bilateral issues about the name that it had for decades with Greece. That was a huge success for the region, and it proves that if there is a will, there is a way to resolve even the hardest issues. It was not a technical issue for Macedonia, former Macedonia, now North Macedonia. It was really identity issue, and the courageous leadership was really helpful in taking this problem seriously and finally put an end to it. But you are right about referendum, but it was not obligatory. That was the official explanation. Only 30% turnout of the people at the referendum, and the referendum question was, are you for EU integration and NATO? So 99% of those who went out, they voted yes. But putting that aside, I think personally that North Macedonia is technically well prepared to start accession negotiations, and it could easily become a front runner in the process, because they really worked so hard, even the previous administration and the current, so that they are really ready to start accession talks. Being members of the NATO is also a positive development for North Macedonia as well. As regards the whole process, if we take the technical side, it's demanding. It demands the engagement of the whole administration. But at the end of the day, it is political, of course, because every move requires a consensus of member states, as I said. So it is a political process, but now it will become officially political as well, with the new methodology that member states will become more involved in the process, because there are member states, it's not secret, that are Eurosceptic. Of course, they don't want to admit the country if the country is not a country. If a country is not ready, if a country shows backsliding in democracy, in human rights, in freedom of media. So fundamentals first, that's also a good approach. And it should be beneficial for candidate countries to really invest into the rule of law as in general. We witnessed some decline of the rule of law during the pandemic, of course, because when you introduce state of emergency, you cannot expect that all freedoms are respected. But hopefully this is behind us, and the post-pandemic period will not look like the period during the pandemic.
Okay, we have one question here on the chat. The question is, what do you think of the EU's visibility during the outbreak of coronavirus in the Western Balkans? Mm-hmm. Should EU do it in a different manner to approach other external actors, or what would be your propose?
That's a good question, and as I said, there are complaints about external actors. External actors are reality. So what the EU or Brussels can do is more aggressive communication strategy, about which I was talking as well, because when you are confronted with China or Russia, you have to take into account their influence to hearts and minds of the people, and you have to correct your own strategy also to attract hearts and minds or to win hearts and minds of the people. But I will not bypass the responsibility of the government. Of course, the government should also invest more in promoting European Union, what the EU has done for us so far. It is a known fact that there are people who think that the biggest donor or the biggest investor is not the EU, but Russia or China. So we should tackle this issue seriously and change the picture. It's not in our interest to have such perception here in Serbia or in some other country in the region, because there are facts that prove that the EU is by far the biggest trade partner, donor, investor, and it should be repeated over and over again until everybody is aware of the fact. So the facts are and figures are the best way to prove it to the people.
Okay, thank you for answering this question. Are there any more questions from the students? If you have a question, just unmute your mic.
Can I ask someone, good morning to everyone. I'm Sofia Popovic, and thank you, Suzana, for a great lecture today. I have one question for you. Mm-hmm. I think that many citizens of Serbia have had high expectation from the EU in safeguarding them in our country over the past years, and most of them have expressed disappointment. Has it been unrealistic to expect more engagement from the EU institution in that sense? Thank you.
Okay, the EU will publish its annual country report in September or late September, the beginning of October. It was it was meant to be published in April, but due to the pandemic, everything's been delayed. So in the next annual report, we will see how it estimates the media situation and the media freedom during the pandemic. But let me remind you that in the last report for the last year, it used somehow unusual wording for the EU, and really stipulated what are the democratic deficiency in Serbia. One of them is for sure media freedom, and it will not go away. The EU follows and monitors what's going on here, and it will put it into the next report. It will also say that it's a good thing that we have a media strategy, but it will also speak about the practice, and it will also mark the cases that happened during the pandemic, such as the arrest of one journalist. And I'm pretty sure that the next report will be even more open than the previous one. And there is no reason to be disappointed by the EU. You should be always disappointed, but by what we can do here. It's not the EU that should provide for media freedom. It is us here that should fight for it.
Okay.
Good morning.
Milan?
Yes, good morning, dear Madam Deputy Prime Minister, dear Suzana. Thank you.
Former.
Well, you know, what's in there is always there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for being with us today and sharing your thoughts with us. And of course, we all appreciate your taking us through those 21 years of history in half an hour, which I think is an impossible task. You have coped with it in an excellent manner. And of course, to a considerable degree, you and other people on the screen have put much input into that road that Serbia and other countries have traveled within those 21 years. I have two questions actually concerning what you shared with us. One is looking ahead. What is the most optimistic, the most difficult, and I would say, on the other hand, impossible task and news that is awaiting us in the process of enlargement? So the most optimistic, the most difficult, and mission impossible, what is ahead of us with respect to integration. And the second question concerns the students. We have on the screen the students from Serbia, from Montenegro. We don't have the students from Sarajevo because today they have a special day, but usually we would have. We have the students from Moldova.
Mm-hmm.
There is some kind of an echo. And of course, we have students from Slovakia online. And for them, what is the reason that they should keep in supporting Serbia's and other countries' European integration? I mean, what's their hope? Why should they be supportive? Why should they still keep their support? What should be their case?
Okay.
Thanks.
Welcome. So for the first question, I just remember what Ivan Krastev said. There is a joke in the region that optimists think that Turkey will become a member state when Albania is presiding, and pessimists think that Albania will become a member state when Turkey is presiding the council. So that's how we feel, basically. Luckily, there is no Serbia in this joke, so that's keeps me going and believing that one day it will be the case. The mission impossible for me will be to leave it as it is. You know, this slow pace, this never-ending accession that drains the enthusiasm here, definitely. So what we would like to see is, as I said, stronger wording. European perspective is not enough. It has been repeatedly said at summits, at meetings, but it's definitely not enough, not anymore after so many years. But on the other hand, I'm fully aware of the state of the region. We are 18 million people. Our GDP is like 6,000 US dollars, the GDP per capita. It makes only like 20% or less of the European GDP per capita. So our 6 economies are weak. Our 6 economies, the combined GDP equals the GDP of Slovakia, for example. So these comparisons tell you where we are and how big or how weak our economies are. And that's why I put emphasis, and I always do, on this economy investment plan for the Western Balkans. You know, there were sayings about Berlin Plus like 3 or 4 years ago. Nobody remembers that anymore. The then German Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sigmar Gabriel, was talking about Berlin Plus, some boost in infrastructure, so boost in employment, of course, and everything else. But it didn't happen. So I'm still hopeful that something hefty financial package will come to the region and help us catch up with the EU. And on the other hand, of course, we are fully aware of our deficiencies in democratic development and everything else. But for me, the priority should be economy. And this could only prevent this exodus I was talking about, like every 2 minutes someone leaves from the Western Balkans. You have, and we have students here. I'm sure that many of them think about leaving their country, respective country, and moving to the EU, which is not good for us remaining here. So our aging population cannot provide for any improvement in the country, unfortunately. So this is impossible scenario to leave it as it is. Optimistic scenario is to do our homework, as everybody says so, to undergo necessary reforms and to move forward quickly. Quickly means by the end of this budget cycle of the EU, we should be informed about the potential date of admittance to the EU. I'm not speaking about 2025, nobody speaks about it anymore, but let's say 2028 or 2030 should be the deadline for us. Why is this important? Because it gives the real perspective here, something tangible. When the Big Bang happened in 2004, every country had the roadmap. We don't have it anymore. So that's the key difference between the then enlargement and the enlargement now. It remains somehow an open-ended process, and it really reduces the enthusiasm in all the countries. So we have to know something, even now in this time when everybody speaks about post-COVID recovery and post-pandemic economic recovery. We want to see enlargement on the agenda. We don't want to see it under the table. So it was one of the most successful policies of the European Union, and it still has. So it's the only region to which the EU could expand. So let us work to finish the process. And why should students from other countries outside of the Western Balkans or from member countries, etc., why should you support it? But because we belong to Europe economically, geographically, culturally. It's about political belonging. That's what we are waiting for. We are part of the Europe. We don't have any other option but to belong to belong to Europe.
Okay, thank you, Suzana. We have one question from Miloš Perović from Montenegro. What do you think, can the current situation regarding the new law on freedom of religion in Montenegro affect the process of our integration into the EU?
The Montenegro is also labeled as front runner in the process together with Serbia. And as I said, it opened all but one chapter, that is competition, which is a very difficult chapter, but okay. I also think that the new annual country report by the European Commission will put the law on religious freedom on the table. Because it has caused some disturbances inside Montenegro and in some other countries, in some other neighboring countries as well. What is important is and what is the first and the only priority is to have the dialogue between the state and the church. Religious freedom is of course important, but even more important is to have a society which tries to accelerate its road to the EU, and you cannot do it if you have people on the streets protesting. So the dialogue, and every part should take a step back and remember that they live in one country, and that country can progress only if all the citizens are happy with living in a country. So the dialogue is a must. Nothing else matters. Not that much.
Okay, before any one of the students ask another question, I'm going to use the opportunity that I'm the moderator and ask you a question. As Milan mentioned, we have students from Serbia, from Bosnia, from Montenegro, Moldova, and Slovakia participating in the project. From out of these 5 countries, 3 countries are the Western Balkan countries. Can you explain to the students who maybe haven't heard of it about the mini Schengen initiative, and what could it pose? Pose for the people in the Western Balkans? What are the pros and what are the cons?
Yes, I'm glad that you asked that, because nobody's talking about mini Schengen. after several months, I haven't heard anything about it. And I think that's one of the best initiatives that happened here. It originates from the Berlin process. At the summit in Trieste in 2017, it was agreed to form a regional economic area. So that could be beneficial for all countries in the Western Balkans, because it assumes that there are basically no borders, that is open access of people, goods, services, capital. That means that we are practicing 4 European freedoms here in the region. So having in mind that all barriers for trade and transport are present, unfortunately, this could really boost the economy and could really improve our performance in economic terms. mini Schengen is important as well because CEFTA agreement was heavily damaged by the introduction of taxes by Kosovo sides to the goods from Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Now taxes are, let's say, lifted, but some reciprocity remains, so it still does not function properly. But CEFTA couldn't resolve that issue, unfortunately. So I think that in the time ahead, we should all give a chance to mini Schengen to really live to its expectations and to help the region to overcome this economic malaise which is coming, and that is recession. And during the pandemic, we had many examples of inside the regions of solidarity. So let us not forget what we started before the pandemic, and let's have at least one initiative that is in our hands, that is not imposed from outside. So this should be our own regional initiative.
Thank you for the answer. Do we have any questions from the students? If you have a question, just unmute the mic.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Cristina and I'm a student from Montenegro. Thank you for your presentation. After decades of progress, the EU is at the risk of falling apart. The United Kingdom is leaving, and the divisions between East, West, North, South, illiberal and liberal are widening. So my question is, what does the future stability of the EU depend on now? How do you see it? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I'm one of those who believe in European project. I don't think it will fall apart. I think Brexit gives a chance to the rest of EU members to recuperate and design something better than it is now. Of course, there are dangers and crises, but the EU has been set as a flexible project. So it goes from one crisis to another. Just remember how it looked like after the economic crisis in 2008 and 9, and then came the migrant crisis, then came Brexit, now it's pandemic. So it's a roller coaster, so to say, but the EU still remains, and 27 member states have the power to really design something better. What I'm advocating is a more political union, because the EU cannot remain only a common market and common currency, but it should become a political union. And you're right to mention that there are divisions. We can see them now with this announced recovery fund, and northern countries who are much richer are not willing to share the debt with their southern neighbors. Southern neighbors do not need loans, they need assistance to overcome the consequences of the pandemic. East-West, of course, that's like a Cold War rhetorics, you know, East-West, but within the EU, illiberal regimes, the EU cannot do much to influence the change in Hungary and Poland, and they are sliding, or they are illiberal regimes. At least Hungary says it's the first illiberal democracy not in the world, but let's say in the European Union. But I think that the new Commission has just started. It was 100 days of its, after its election, when it was hit with pandemic. So let us give chance to the people to show what they can do to start this conference on European future, to have a debate about the future, and to bring about some decision which should keep the EU together, not falling apart. I'm not a believer in the EU falling apart. I'm a believer in some modifications of the functioning in the future.
Okay, thank you, Christina, for your question, and thank you, Suzana, for answering. Do we have any more questions? Okay, I'm just checking the chat. Okay, if we do not have any questions right now from the students, I would ask our colleague and partner Milan from SATN, do you want to maybe say something about the activities that we are going to have till the end of the project, or maybe some?
Yeah, it's wonderful to use this spot, although I still would like to see some more questions, because this is an admirable opportunity to have Deputy Prime Minister on the panel and having an opportunity to ask a question to somebody with that kind of experience and vision. I think gives everybody the right to ask at least 2 questions, not only one. So I would encourage the students to use the opportunity and hammer Suzana with questions. She is tough, she can handle it. Just remember, the students, there are no stupid questions. So
only stupid answers. Yes.
Well, you know, we all try to cope with the questions so far.
Yeah.
But I would use this opportunity to have a couple of in-house announcements. We are going to have a debate on June the 8th, which is going to be held online, unfortunately, because it doesn't seem that the conditions for the travel and the restrictions which are still existing would allow the students to travel to Slovakia as we have planned. Secondly, we will also have our survey online, which makes it a little bit more difficult, because I still would like the survey teams to look into the eyes of those who are surveyed, but this is what we have to do under the conditions. And the third, we still do not know how we are going to do the presentations, because we would like the students to travel to Brussels, but there we are not getting any signals that the conditions for travel to Belgium might be easing to a degree which would allow us all to travel. So it is also possible that even the policy recommendations, and Suzana, just to let you know, this is one of the components. Students are actually writing recommendations on EU policy, and they are then discussing these recommendations with the members of the European Parliament. We have done so far 2 of these presentations in Brussels. We always had a very good turnout from the members of the European Parliament, from the Foreign Relations Committee. And of course, the unique feature of this project is that these are the students who are engaged in our project are the only ones that are actually presenting and putting forward recommendations to the parliamentarians in Brussels. We don't know whether the travel conditions will allow us actually to see the parliamentarians, but we will certainly have them online. It all changes a bit our project, which was based also on the fact that the students could, at least for a couple of days, mingle and spend the time together and communicate, which is an important aspect of our project. But unfortunately, we have to do what we can, and hope that in the fall the conditions would be much better, and that the pandemic would not be returning and we will be able to implement the project as we were implementing it. So this is all probably from the in-house calls, and now I would probably go back to Anja so she can ask the students again whether they actually don't want to miss an opportunity to ask Suzana another round of questions, because we still have time for our debate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Milan. So I see that there are no new questions on the chat. Do you maybe want to pose some questions here? If you do, just unmute the mic. Not yet. Okay, I will ask you something. At the beginning of the projects, we usually had the workshops with the people from the maybe PR part, and they were speaking with students about the some rules how to present something when you're speaking with, when you're debating or when you're presenting the policy brief to the EU members of the parliament. Do you maybe have some tips for the students who are going to present the policy briefs to the parliamentarians?
Well, always keep in mind that parliamentarians are politicians, so do not be shy in presenting what you really think and what you really mean. So I don't suggest any technicalities. I don't suggest any technical wording which you learn from various seminars. They are politicians, so speak to politicians in Brussels just as you speak to politicians in Serbia. Be concise, be precise, and speak up your mind. That's how can you be heard, nothing else. It's not the European Commission, it's not some directorate with technical language. They are politicians, really. And good politicians.
Thank you. Do we have another question for Ms. Suzana? As Milan mentioned, it's really a shame if you don't use the opportunity that she is here with us. Okay. Ms. Jelena Milić.
Suzana, you have mentioned some kind of a slowdown in a Berlin process, and what I found very interesting that you highlight the fact that actually the mini Schengen initiative is not something new, artificial, imposed. It's actually natural extension of what have already been agreed between member states, countries of the region, and EU institutions. But what are the key nuances? I think it's more of the labor movement. What are the new features that distinguish it from the what have been agreed in Trieste, for example? And do you think that lack of reference of mini Schengen initiative is due to the pandemic that we were all hit by, or that there is some kind of interplay between Germany and US that can actually kill the initiative? I'm bold. I was told to ask smart and tough questions.
No, you're right. It's not about pandemic. The initiative was slowed down even before pandemic, and the fact that only 3 countries accept it fully, that's something which I cannot understand. If something is in your favor, if something brings you benefits, how can you not embrace it? On the other hand, you embrace like 70 other regional initiatives which have more or less no effects, or at least no measurable results. That's why I think the new effort from Serbian, Macedonian, Albanian side is needed to push for the initiative now, not wait for pandemic to officially stop, but to reinvigorate the whole initiative. Of course, it's about politics. Of course, it's not in everybody's interest that the region can have something which is beneficial to all. Then how can external actors act if they see the whole region as one? So I'm pretty sure that we will look at some place in the future, but with the chance of resolving the Kosovo issue, the chances for mini Schengen to be in full speed are much better.
Okay, thank you. If you have some technical difficulties, if you cannot turn on the mic or whatever, you can pose the question and write it in chat so I can read it. Is there anyone who would like to pose another question?
Can I? I have a question. It's obvious that Serbia isn't going to be a part of European Union soon. Is there any alternative for Serbia for connection with other countries?
I'm not the one who will say there are no alternatives. Of course, there are alternatives, but you have to be rational and see what are the pros and cons of the alternatives. That's why I strongly advocate the EU, not other options. And I think the majority of the people in Serbia agree with me. Yes, there are alternatives, but this is the best way to remain in the seat. That is to push for the EU, because the EU offers the most for the country and the most for all the people in the country. Otherwise, if these alternatives were better, then 50,000 people that leave Serbia every year would go there, not to the EU countries. You would agree with me, I think.
Okay. Do we have more questions? Okay, still nothing on chat. Okay. If we do not have any more questions, then I would really like to use the opportunity to thank the UCs for organizing the students. Also to Milan and Rasto for being such a good partners on this project. Also the entire CES team, and of course Miss Suzana Grubješić. Hope we are going to have another opportunity to see you maybe at the Faculty of Political Science in Belgrade or somewhere in the near future when the entire craziness with the pandemic finishes. Also, I would like to tell the students that, to remind them that we are going to have the next debate online on June 8th. And I would like to encourage the UCs to help prepare the students, as they've previously always done a really good job. Now I would like to ask Ms. Jelena Milic, the director of CES, if she maybe wants to say a few words.
First of all, although I do not appear often at these debates, I think this is one of the most valuable long-standing CES projects, and it wouldn't be possible to make it without great cooperation with MESA 10. I think that in the future we all can also maybe consider discussing how new or existing regional initiatives as the ones that Ms. Grubješić has so brilliantly break down and mentioned can fit in new ad hoc initiatives that we are seeing coming from north to south of Europe, for example, like the 3C initiative. I think that there is a huge actually possibility that mini Schengen is an excellent interface, so to say. We know that formally 3C is for the EU member states from north to south, but bearing in mind that it is flexible and ad hoc, maybe there is a possibility, and I know that former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Croatia, Ms. Vesna Pusic, has been pushing for the Western Balkans membership in it, that Montenegro, correct me if I'm wrong, has already an observer status in the initiative. So maybe we can also, in a scope of our debates, how to bring the region, discuss a little bit what would be benefits for all our countries to see regional cooperation outside of the box that the EU institutions usually force us to, so to say. So in Serbia, even among experts, when you say regional integration, we all think somehow on Western Balkan 6. But Serbia, for example, in the last several years, have boosted cooperation with Hungary. Put aside how you see it. From where I sit, it is EU and NATO member states still. It has improved cooperation with Romania, Bulgaria, and Greece. Greece is not a neighboring country, but just like as it is. So I think that we also should think, and we have students from Moldova, which is, I think, also an opportunity to see how this East-West Balkans situation can help us fit in with the certain regions of the EU, and there is abundant knowledge from the V4 experience, for example, as well. Just the idea.
Okay, thank you. So thank you all so much, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Anja.
Does anyone have any final comments or questions?
Well, if I might just intercede before we all depart to do our daily routines and daily challenges. I'd like to close this with a very simple notion that European integration is a project of cooperation. The other part of that verb, or the adversary to that verb, is either in-cooperation or hostility or war. So whoever is a believer of cooperation could be looking for a different project on the European continent than the European Union, but it doesn't exist. And it doesn't mean that it's good, that it's the best one. It's the best one in the history. It's very imperfect. It's so imperfect as our democracy is imperfect. But the fun part in it is that it is able, and we are able to shape it, and we are able to make it better. So that's why we remain to be believers in European and transatlantic cooperation. And if I were to close it with the words of a poet, I would probably use John Donne, an English poet from the 17th century, who said that no man is an island in itself, and he is a part of a larger continent, which paraphrasically means that no human being can live alone. He or she has to interact with the others. So the European Union is nothing but an instrument of how to interact with the others. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody on board, and predominantly Suzana for sharing her thoughts with us, and of course Jelena and Anja for working on this with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Milan.
Thank you all.
Thank you so
Thank
much for having me here.
you all. See you soon. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.